Welcome to Marvel Source. I'm Bifna, and today I want to take a look at your friendly neighborhood sad boy, Spider-Man. I've been reading some of Spider-Man's comics since I've watched No Way Home, and I want to talk about what this does to Peter, trying to give you a little insight into Spider-Man as a character. I wanted to step away from my normal format of reading one particular comic because this issue takes part over several comics, mostly the three immediately after the Civil War series ends, when we jump back into the Amazing Spider-Man universe to really dive into what's going on with Peter in his life, how this Civil War affected him, and how Kingpin plays into what he's dealing with now. If you haven't seen the Hawkeye series or Spider-Man No Way Home, I suggest you turn around now because there will be some spoilers. I have seen both already, so I do want to make some comparisons between what I'm going to mention about these comics into what's been dealt with in the cinematic universe through the shows and the movies, and I don't want you guys to get anything ruined. I want to start with what is going on with Spider-Man. In 1999, the comics laying the groundwork for the release of the Civil War series is underway. One of the first comics being Amazing Spider-Man number 529. In this issue, Spider-Man is already established to be working along Tony Stark. Similar to the Civil War film, Tony is making Peter a new Spider-Man outfit. So having already had this relationship, Tony asked Peter to support him with talking to Congress about the registration of superpowered individuals. But in doing so, Peter will have to reveal to everyone in the world that he is Spider-Man. At first, Peter was pretty worried about it because he has strived so hard to keep his identity a secret as to protect MJ and his Aunt May. Now one of his most trusted partners, Tony Stark, is asking him to put all of that on the line. Ultimately, Peter volunteers that information and releases his identity to the world. Some professionals would come to widely regard this as a bad move. Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the Civil War series today because it is quite long. If you've seen Captain America Civil War, you will know that Tony and Steve Rogers don't end up on the best of terms. In the MCU, Spider-Man was on Tony Stark's team. Having gone to Queens to recruit Peter, Tony offered to remake his outfit there as well. Just a nice little adaptation from page to screen. And even though they didn't release Spider-Man's identity in the Civil War movie, it did set the groundwork for the later films. In Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio uploaded a video outing Peter instead of Peter doing it voluntarily. By the end of the Civil War comic series, Peter Parker has switched sides. He no longer supports Iron Man. Revealing his identity has its consequences. Allies and villains alike now know who he is and can take advantage of that. Enter Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, one of the most feared, dangerous, and powerful crime lords in all of the Marvel Universe. He's usually depicted as New York's crime overlord, the big head honcho in most of the crime in New York, and he's introduced as Spider-Man's adversary, but later went on to be a menace to a lot of other Marvel heroes, and particularly the Daredevil, becoming one of his arch enemies. And I believe I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention Vincent D'Onofrio right away. His portrayal of Kingpin in the cinematic universe is uncanny. Kingpin is usually depicted as an extraordinarily heavy-set appearance with his bald head. He's not obese, he's not a fat person. All this size comes from his sheer muscle. He can withstand a lot of force. In the Hawkeye show, he gets hit by a car, he gets shot with an arrow, he's point blank shot with some explosives, and he kind of comes out all right from it, a little hurt, a little stumbling, but he does ultimately survive all those hits because he's such a huge dude. And even though we don't see it, Maya Lopez in the Hawkeye show point blank shoots him. We don't see it on camera, him getting shot, but through the comics we know that he becomes blind, so I hope this is the direction they're going to take it further with Kingpin in the MCU. You may be asking, Bifna, where are you going with this? What does this have to do with anything? Well, remember how I said that Spider-Man revealing himself was a bad move? In doing so, it left Peter open to his biggest fears, the ones he loved getting hurt, and Kingpin taking full advantage of that knowledge of who Peter Parker was. In an attempt to take out Mary Jane with a sniper ordered by Kingpin, Aunt May inadvertently got hit instead when Peter dived to protect MJ, not knowing his aunt was so close by, putting Aunt May in the hospital with no certainty that she will be okay. This infuriates Peter. He works so hard to keep his aunt and MJ protected, but now that the world knows who he is, the closest ones to him are now becoming targets. Spider-Man ends up going to the prison that Kingpin is at and completely embarrasses him in front of the crowd of inmates. Kingpin, being a man who thrives on his ego and being viewed as a man of power, was utterly defeated to a crowd of witnesses. This was Spider-Man's plan. He didn't want to kill Fisk, not right away. Before leaving the prison, Spider-Man threatens to fill Kingpin's lungs full of webbing. Short of taking out his lungs and transplanting new ones, Fisk would not survive this. This is one of the times we see Peter truly on the edge of killing someone. He wouldn't before because A, he had a moral compass that wouldn't allow it, and B, he was unsure how it would affect his family. But if his aunt dies, then that is one concern out of the way and he can make an exception for the first one. If you have seen Spider-Man No Way Home, they touch on this conflict. Now that everyone knows his identity, everyone close to him is affected, with Ned and MJ not being able to get into MIT due to their association to Spider-Man, as well as the constant press and eyes on his life as well as his apartment. The fact people knew who he was is what allowed the villains to come into this world in the first place. If he didn't have to reveal his identity, no one would know who he was and he wouldn't have had to go to Doctor Strange for help. Everything would have been fine. But Quentin Beck, Mysterio, put a stop to that life. And through the chain of events of that happening, Green Goblin ends up killing Aunt May. And just like in the comics, Peter needs to release his anger somehow. The fight between him and Green Goblin is his fiercest so far in the MCU. He did not hold back, and had Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man not been there, he would have definitely killed Green Goblin. After all the other villains was sent back and the memory spell was done, Peter didn't want MJ and Ned to get their memories back about him, because this way they are much more safe, and that's probably the most bittersweet ending he could have asked for. Everyone is okay, but at what cost? Peter is left utterly alone. On the positive side, from a story standpoint, this opens up a world of possibilities for the direction they can take Spider-Man in the future. One direction I would like to see them go is have more involvement with Kingpin. With Vincent D'Onofrio back in the MCU as Kingpin, he is now an asset that can be used to drive the crime narrative in any given MCU installment. We could see Spider-Man teaming up with Daredevil at some point, probably long after the Echo series, but the potential is there. With Kingpin being a big player in any sort of street-level crime that heroes like Spider-Man deal with, the possibilities are endless. And outside of any live-action media we see of Spider-Man, we do get a taste of what Kingpin can do to Spider-Man through Into the Spider-Verse, which is also a story about loss, but from Kingpin's point of view. His wife and son witness him fighting Spider-Man and end up leaving. In the rush to get away, they end up getting in a car accident and dying. Kingpin is haunted by this and worked with Dr. Octavius to build a device to bring his wife and son back from another dimension to be with him. Spider-Man stops him and the machine is destroyed, but Kingpin in his own rage ends up killing Spider-Man with just his fist. If this isn't a sign of how strong Kingpin is, I don't know what is. Spider-Man can take a lot of hits before he can go down, so the fact that all Kingpin had to do was smash him once is a clear sign of his great strength as a villain. And that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've been dabbling with these thoughts about Spider-Man for a couple of weeks now since seeing No Way Home, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts as well. Let me know down in the comments. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to know when these go up. Thanks again for watching, and Happy New Year.